I want to thank everyone for coming in. First off, I know it is lunch for maybe the majority of people, but I still appreciate it. Yeah, just to give a little further clarification of even kind of what I do at Utah State University. I'm in the combined clinical counseling psychology PhD program. I've been a student therapist for about 5 years. And with that, I've seen a number of different populations where I've given skills for anxiety, depression, OCD, insomnia, burnout, chronic pain, relationship conflicts, and even social skills. Um, so let's kind of, I do want to give, I know everyone is coming here for help with their burnout specifically. Um, and there's, everyone's coming here, they feel dread, they're tired, they're burned out. But I do want to be honest and say, just coming to this workshop and the fact that it is only like 1 hour, this won't solve everything. I kind of want to be at the forefront of that. But what I do hope is that either I can give one or two insights, or even you take away the big idea of this, and then that can lead you to the path of a more enjoyable life. Also, kind of like the way this will, in terms of like how this will specifically work, um, there will be one instance where I do ask people to share, but there won't be any. Well, I try to make it one place specifically where you're not giving too much personal information, but only share if you feel comfortable. Other than that, I will ask you to participate, but it will be within kind of like your own space. So there will be no sharing over video or anything like that. Um, I had another thing. I think that's about it. But again, that one place I will ask people to share, just share only if you're comfortable. And even at that, I try to make it a space where I thought maybe people would maybe feel a little more comfortable. Um, okay. To really jump into this, the other thing I wanted to mention is that um, I kind of think of this as similar to like I don't know if anyone's seen Dora the Explorer, but of how, I'll keep talking and just give places for people to participate in their own space. So some of these spaces will be explicit where I'll say, oh, let me give you 5 minutes. Other places I'll say, oh, I'll just give you 1 minute to reflect. It does help if you just have something to write down so you can potentially just remember some of these ideas and kind of follow along with what we're doing here. Okay. To really bring everyone to this present moment, I want everyone just to jot down, just to themselves. You can do this on a piece of paper or even on your phone, but I want you to just jot down what you feel in this moment. And I think you'll notice throughout this session, I'll kind of describe and ask you to be honest with yourself. And I will say that is a place where you can get the most growth. It's just being honest with yourself. So this can be the first place that you do practice that. It's just being honest with yourself of like what you feel in this very, very moment. This can be if you have any silly thoughts or you're like, I don't know who this guy is, or you're excited about this, or maybe you're excited about plans after the end of the day. I just want you to give yourself 5 minutes. And again, we'll pause here for about 5 minutes just to jot down what you feel in this very, very moment. I will also do it myself because I feel like I need to be a little more present right now. All right. So again, and you will not be asked to share this. This is just for yourself. So, yes, please just take 5 minutes to yourself just to jot down what you feel in this very, very moment. Okay. All right. Now that we're kind of present, we can go in and jump into the good stuff. So, right off the bat, I kind of really want to go into just what is burnout. Um, it's an interesting word. The specific word is interesting because there's no definitive definition, but the World Health Organization defines it as like energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism, also a sense of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. I also want to let it be known that burnout can be from a number of things and not just your work. So, if you're a caregiver to someone else, if you are a parent, just on a day to day basis, if you're just tired in general, you could even get burned out from working out. Um, Sometimes it's one thing where it's like it's kind of depleted all of you. But other times it could just be a combination of all your responsibilities just really piling up. So that's one aspect I really want to highlight is, yeah, burnout can, you can be burned out from a number of things and not just work. And, one way I like to think of burnout specifically is having little to no battery on these three places that we all have. So, emotionally, cognitively, and physically. Burnout is a definition of being drained in all three aspects of these areas. And that's what I would, define burnout as. Because often you can be emotionally charged, but cognitively just low on energy, and maybe physically slightly lower, or even like a different combination where physically you are just spent, but emotionally, you still feel pretty charged. And cognitively, it's, your battery's still going. It's not low, but it's still going. And so I think of burnout as just a low battery in all three of these aspects. Now, it's kind of easy to see, okay, we know what the problem is. So, what is the quote unquote solution? Um, and it's a little obvious, but it's to recharge yourself. But the question is like, how do we get to that place of being recharged? And so I like to ask this question of like, what recharges you? And for some, these things can range from a number of things, whether it's relationships in their lives, it's personal growth, it's health, it's leisure, spirituality, it's education, it's art, it's food. Um, I kind of think of it as like what is it that you participate in, and afterwards you feel pretty good about yourself, like you feel like, wow, I can kind of go about my day a little more happy, a little more excited. And I also want to give a little insight even on my what recharges me specifically. So for me, um, art is a place for me that I feel recharged. So these are just two art pieces that I've done in the past. Also, food. My brother, this is an image that my brother made sushimi for my mom and I, and also like spending time with family. Um, these were some tacos I made with my girlfriend. We were pretty pumped about them. Um, and then also, just spending quality time with my girlfriend. And here she's just petting or like combing her Malamute, and he's a pretty big boy. But just like these moments where it's like, okay, I feel recharged. There's not really necessarily a goal in mind, but it's like I'm actively participating in some of these things. Also, I love taking pictures of my cat. This is my cat, Molly. She's a little sassy. So I like to take pictures of her where she's kind of displaying her, she's the queen of the household. But yeah, I kind of want to change it back to you all of what recharges you. So again, we'll take 5 minutes and I want you to jot down what it is that recharges you. And then feel free to put in the chat some of these things that do recharge you. Again, if you're comfortable. All right. Ty mentions he likes going outside, being outside in the mountains specifically. It's nice and warm. It would be a good day to actually go outside, now that you say it. Yeah, and Heather mentioned playing with her dogs and doing anything with her daughter, going on a walk, laughter. Awesome. Again, if you're kind of thinking about these things and you kind of feel like there's a roadblock in terms of like you actually don't know what it is that does recharge you, I think that would be a good place to kind of like highlight for yourself and be like, okay, maybe that's something I can work on even after this, of like understanding what does recharge me. Yeah, someone mentioned making music for themselves. Yeah, that's awesome. Claymation, cool, cool. All right. Thank you for everyone who shared in the chat. Uh, let's kind of move on to the next thing. I do want everyone to kind of like highlight this, and we'll come back to this, and I'll show you right now kind of what why that is. So this is like a general outline of kind of like the concept of what we will be going over today. So part of it is assessing your own battery And I think I kind of described it earlier of like, if we're burned out, our battery is pretty fried. So it's assessing, how burned out you are. And then you'll see later of like how far you are from recharging yourself. And then after that, we'll kind of look into like the identifying barriers. So a lot of times these are feelings, thoughts, and emotions, kind of preventing you from participating in what recharges you. Excuse me. And then it's, I offer a difference in how you hold those feelings. So, can we be neutral to those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions that do often hinder your ability to recharge? And then, kind of once we've gone in that direction of treating what is there with kindness and non-judgmental stance, it's can we engage with what does recharge us? And I think it's I did highlight these two middle ones, so like 2 and 3, as because often these are the places where I would say even myself, and I've seen clients in the past where there can be a lot of difficulty in those two places. So I wanted to highlight those not only because you'll see where I talk about that specifically, but that can be a place where it is difficult to kind of either recognize what's going on in the moment or even changing your perspective on how you engage with these feelings, thoughts, and emotions. All right. Now, as I mentioned, part of assessing your battery is understanding how far is it that you are from being fully recharged. Sometimes it could be like, well, I maybe just need just a little time to myself and I can actually be fully recharged. Or is it more of like, okay, it's a little more investment in myself, but I can still get there. Or is it, is this something where it's like, okay, I would need a lot of time to myself? And I think that's really important to gauge before you kind of go forward and saying, like, I'm going to fully recharge myself, because then it kind of changes your expectations of what's to happen. But once we understand that we do have to fully recharge, then it's like the idea of what is showing up for us when we do try to recharge, what has shown up for us in the past. Is this anger? Is this anxiety? Is this frustration? Is this hopelessness? Are these showing up when you're actively trying to recharge yourself? I kind of think of it as, for me, I, as I mentioned, I love doing art and that's what recharges me. But sometimes, when, when I've had a rough semester and I'm going home, often I just become very frustrated with myself of like, I don't have more time to myself. I didn't, I even get frustrated of like, I only got a 15-minute lunch, or like I'm stuck on like a problem on like one of my papers and I can't get past it. And then so like this frustration shows up even when I have an opportunity to recharge. So like for me, it's like, oh, it's frustration and anger. But honestly, this is also a question for everyone, is what is it that shows up in that place? So again, I would like to give everyone about 5 minutes. Um, there will be no sharing. This is for yourself. And this is a moment of reflection. And also, as I mentioned, also a place to be honest with yourself of like, okay, what is it that shows up when I try to participate in making music for myself or making food for myself or spending time with loved ones in my life? Is there something that shows up um, that is preventing me from being very present in those times so that I can fully charge up? And again, take 5 minutes to yourself, and this will be just for yourself. There will be no sharing. Another thing I want to add is that it's very possible that you actually don't know what is showing up in the moment. And again, this could be a place of like, okay, I can take this idea and work on it on my own, after this is done, once you go home and start to really assess what you're feeling in those moments. So if you don't actually have an answer for yourself in this moment of saying, like, okay, what is it that shows up when I try to recharge? Then maybe that is a place for exploring yourself. Okay, let's kind of move on to the next thing. Now, if you are aware of what is coming up in that moment, I really want to ask yourself, I want you to ask yourself, is what is it that you do with that feeling when it shows up? You know, is that something that you fight? Do you actively fight that feeling when it shows up? Do you get angry with yourself for experiencing that feeling? Do you avoid it? Do you try talking back to it? I think it's like this awareness of what we're experiencing and then what we're doing with our own experiences in that moment. Even for me, and I would say the most common thing that I see for myself and among my friends, even in family and clients, is that a lot of avoidance. So when I kind of think of frustration, if frustration shows up for me, especially when I'm working on something school related or any of my research, anything like that, I am very quick to pull out my phone. That is like the number one thing that I see across, a variety of people, including myself. And so that's something I notice is that, oh, I am avoiding frustration. Sometimes it's even the idea of having to think that I will just pull out my phone and be like, I can't, I don't have, I don't have the bandwidth for this, even though it can be something very simple. Um, so again, what is it that you do with this feeling? Do you fight it? Do you avoid it? Do you talk back to it? Um, Another way to even think about this is, how would you describe your relationship with these feelings? Are they contentious? You know, Are you kind of, always angry when they show up? It's like, okay, what is another way of recognizing what's going on internally? And then also, I think it's just nice of just understanding how long you've treated these feelings or even this specific feeling this way. And again, it doesn't always have to be a feeling. Sometimes it is a thought, sometimes it's an emotion. But understanding how long you've treated this feeling, this thought, this emotion will kind of gain a sense of like how quick you are to kind of go in that direction. If this is something you've been doing the past month, it's like, okay, then kind of doing something different with this feeling will be rather easy, quote unquote. Um, but if this is something that you've been doing for years, even a year, then it's like, okay, this may take a little bit more work than if this is only something you've been doing with this feeling for the past week. Again, if we kind of go back to my example of like being on my phone when frustration shows up when I'm at work. Um, this took a long time and a lot of effort on my part to work on this. Um, I would say, this is something I've been actively doing the past 2 years of like, okay, I'm quick to pull out my phone if I'm frustrated at work with a problem. So it's like, okay, it's been going on for 2 years. Then intervening may be a little more challenging than if it was just occurring the past week. And then kind of with that, it's like, what is it like to notice your actions towards this feeling? Does anything come up for you? Is it surprising? Is it hurtful? Or is it like, oh, yeah, that makes sense? A lot of this is raising awareness of what's internally going on. And that's honestly what we want to do is be aware of internally what is going on. And now the big question is, can you have a different relationship with these feelings, these emotions, these thoughts? I mean, even if we kind of look at the difference, there's a drastic difference in kind of like even these images. So we see with this one, we can have a neutral stance. We can hold these feelings, these thoughts, these emotions lightly. We can even listen to them versus, putting in effort to fight them, putting in energy to avoid it, and taking time to talk back to it. But really, the question is, are you willing and do you want to have a different relationship with these feelings? And I think it's important if you're saying no in this very moment, then I think that's something to highlight as well. It's like, okay, why are you saying no? And as I mentioned, a lot of this, a lot of this kind of throughout this 1 hour session is honestly just being honest with yourself. Like why it is that you're saying no. And if you are saying no to that, I would ask you if it's worth to have a different relationship with these feelings, these thoughts, these emotions, so that you can go in the direction of being fully charged. Because honestly, trying to juggle all of this seems like a lot of work. You got the emotion showing up. You're trying to fully recharge, but you're still putting an effort to fight it, to avoid it, to talk back to it. So how would you be able to recharge if you're actively, doing these things to your emotions? So that's why I kind of ask, is it worth having a different relationship with these feelings? I kind of think of it as, sometimes this metaphor does fall flat, but for some reason I still like going back to it. Of, when I go hiking in the canyon, I often see like very beautiful rocks or very beautiful trees. And, there's some trees that aren't really all that, or there's some rocks that are just what I would consider not fun. But I certainly don't do anything about those trees or those rocks. I don't try to move the rock. I don't try to cover it. I don't try to knock down the tree. I simply let them be and just observe them. And that's how I kind of think of it, as like having this more healthy relationship with our feelings and being neutral towards them, of just letting them be. Can we let them be and still go about our day? And even in this very specific situation, can we let our emotions be when they show up and yet still participate in what engages us? And so, yeah, that's why I kind of come full circle and kind of thinking about what is it that recharges you, so that we can get to that place of being fully charged. And once you've assessed your battery, you kind of see what shows up when you are trying to engage with what's recharging you, and you've changed your stance on how you treat these feelings. It's kind of like the final piece of saying, like, I will actively engage with what recharges me. And I think it's really important to be very direct, even with yourself, of saying, like, okay, like I've internally done this work of being more neutral to these feelings, and even putting in work to be mindful of what shows up. So it's like, okay, now we need to do the final piece of like engaging with what recharges you. Also, these are, sometimes this won't happen overnight, but I think it's like a constant practice. Like it's a constant practice that you keep doing with yourself. And I think that's also where the honesty comes into par, of like, am I actually practicing this when I try to participate in what recharges me? Am I struggling in any specific area? Also, honesty and even identifying what recharges you. If you don't know what recharges you, maybe that's a place for exploration, and that's a good place to start. And so, just to wrap up, kind of giving a big overview, this is what we did for the day: assessing your battery, kind of figuring out, like, okay, am I fully recharged? Am I not fully recharged? And then seeing how far away you are from being that charged up person. And then identifying what shows up when you try to actively participate in what recharges you. What feelings show up? What thoughts show up? What emotions? And sometimes, as I mentioned, this is a place where it can be really difficult if, A, you're not honest with yourself, or even B, it's difficult even recognizing these things. And I think that's okay. That's okay to be at a place where, well, actually, any place it's okay to be where you're struggling. But yeah, it's okay to, have that internal struggle of saying, like, I'd rather not know what I feel when I try to actively participate in what recharges me. Because sometimes that opens up other feelings Sometimes that opens up things you didn't recognize you were feeling in that moment. And that can be scary. And then it's going to the very difficult question of like, can you have a different relationship with these feelings? Can you be neutral towards these feelings? And often that can be a very difficult place too, of saying, no, I don't. I don't want to change my attitude towards my anger when it shows up. And that's okay. But then it's like the question of like, is it worthwhile to have a neutral stance towards your anger or even your anxiety or sadness or frustration so that you can participate in what recharges you? And then once you've gotten to that place of, having a much healthier relationship with those feelings, those thoughts, or emotions, then it's like saying, okay, I'm going to engage with what recharges me. Because that's the final step, really. And that's truly the final step of saying, like, okay, I'm going to engage. And again, I want to mention that, you know, it's very possible that this will not happen overnight, and that's okay. But it's like taking this idea and working on it, working on it, working on it, working on it, working on it. I kind of think of like attempting it and seeing where you hit roadblocks and then working on those roadblocks and then attempting it again and then seeing where you hit roadblocks and then work on it again. Or if you got to a place where you're like, okay, I can be neutral towards these feelings, I need to engage with what gives me life, then it's like practicing that, you know, and that takes work as well. I think one thing maybe not a lot of people mention, but even working on yourself, I mean, it's in the phrase, it takes work. Unfortunately, this doesn't just come. This isn't a. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a thing that you constantly work on yourself.